Okay, we'll start with this. Now, my previous video, we talked about Top Rank amending their existing deal with Teofimo Lopez. That's not to be confused with striking a new deal so much as revising the old one. Teofimo Lopez, for the foreseeable future, will be fighting under the Top Rank banner, provided everything goes well, and the George Kambosos Jr. fight, and for the most part, I think it will. What effect will this have moving forward? And why did Top Rank decide to change their stance on what to do with Teofimo Lopez when it looked a lot like they were going to shelf him? Well, here's the thing. They can't shelf him, or they couldn't, I should say. The reason you couldn't shelf Teofimo Lopez is because he's in possession of 4 titles. 3 of them, at least 3 of them, come with mandatory challengers. And there's a purse bid attached to each one of those potential mandatory challengers, what would be each one of those mandates. So every time one of those mandates rolls around and a deal isn't reached and a purse bid gets ordered,
like the one that got ordered for Lopez versus Kambosos.
Every time that happens, every single time that happens, that affords Triller an opportunity to bid on the fight. That affords Matchroom an opportunity to bid on the fight and thereby host it should they place the winning bid. Essentially, even if Top Rank wanted to shelf Teofimo Lopez out of spite, out of creating waves and creating problems, even if they wanted to do that, they wouldn't be able to.
Or they wouldn't have been, I should say.
The reason a lot of people assumed that Top Rank might have tried to shelf Teofimo Lopez beyond the George Kambosos Jr. fight is because that fight is a one-off. You know, Teofimo wasn't going to be fighting on Triller henceforth. He was still under contract with Top Rank. So what the fight fans are telling themselves is, for all the trouble that he created for Top Rank, they might try to spite him by keeping him on the shelf and making him collect dust, the way that Mikey Garcia collected dust when he wanted out of his Top Rank contract. The difference between Teofimo and Mikey in those situations is that Teofimo is in possession of 4 titles, 3 of which come with mandatory challengers. And I reiterate, every time a mandatory comes down, every time a fight gets ordered, there's going to be a deadline to make a fight. And if a fight isn't made by the time that deadline rolls around, a purse bid will be ordered, and you're back in the exact same situation you were in with the Kambosos fight, to where other promotional outfits and other platforms are going to could place a bid for Teofimo's fight. So, in a nutshell, Top Rank couldn't have shelved this guy if they wanted to. And that's all the more reason to try to reach a solution, amend the deal. The existing deal you have with Teofimo Lopez.
Just give him what he wants for now.
Give him what he wants because you can't actually shelf him. You can't actually stop him from fighting since he's in possession of all those alphabet titles. Give him what he wants for now because it will reflect poorly on Top Rank to the higher-ups at ESPN if one of the young guys, one of the young gunners that brought them in some very good ratings, that Lomachenko fight, if you can't control that situation internally,
you can't get all your ducks in order.
You're already coming up short with Terrence Crawford and finding him quality opponents that would thereby translate into big viewership, big ratings. You're coming up short there, and you can't afford to lose Lopez too. Not to another platform.
So they had to give him what he wants.
And what does he want? He wants more money. He wants to fight on pay-per-view, and they're going to make that possible for him now moving forward. In my previous video, you heard Bob Arum say that, a Lomachenko fight at 135 pounds, they could bill that as a pay-per-view. A Lomachenko rematch, I should say. I don't know how the Lopez people feel about that, but it might represent a great enough financial value to Teofimo that perhaps he'll consider it. And that's a possibility we talked about here on the channel months ago, that the people over there at Top Rank might be invested in seeing that rematch come into fruition because they didn't get to stage it as a pay-per-view the first time out. The pandemic affected that, whereas with a rematch, now that the crowds are back and everything is a little bit more stable, perhaps they'll be able to get out of the second fight what they weren't able to get out of the first.
Once again, I don't know how Lopez feels about that.
Teofimo Lopez and his father have been talking a lot about a lot of people. Talking about a Devin Haney fight, talking about a Josh Taylor fight. Bob Arum blew off the idea that Teofimo might fight Devin Haney. That comes as no surprise to me, but I'd wager that Teofimo would rather fight Devin Haney than face Lomachenko for a second time.
Just one man's opinion.
But I've been telling you guys, I'm not holding my breath to see Teofimo Lopez versus Devin Haney anytime in the near future. I'm just not convinced that's a fight that happens next or even after next. At which point, the conversation then turns to what should Devin Haney do? Because Teofimo might end up fighting Loma for a second time, or he might end up moving up to 140 pounds, fight, I don't know, maybe Jose Pedraza, somebody like that, so he can stay up there long enough that he catches a vacant title, a newly vacated title, after Josh Taylor moves up, after the Jack Catterall fight, because I told you, I'm not convinced Josh Taylor sticks around to fight Teofimo Lopez. I'm convinced that if he beats Jack Catterall, he's going to move up and look to fight Terrence Crawford.
All those belts he's got to go vacant.
The reset button will effectively be hit on the 140-pound division. And I'll tell you something.
I don't know which way Teofimo Lopez is going to decide to go.
Not completely sure here and now. But when it comes to that Devin Haney fight, hell, when it comes to Devin Haney, you know what he might need to do? He might need to beat Teofimo Lopez to the punch. He might need to forget about the belt that he's got at 135 and see about moving up to 140 pounds before Teofimo gets there. He might need to see about positioning himself to catch a belt on the fly once Josh Taylor moves up. He might need to see about doing that before Teofimo gets there. Because we know Bob's not invested in making that fight between them at all. There are a lot of people out there who place no value on Devin Haney's title in spite of how all of that broke down, in spite of how all of that happened.
People don't seem to care.
What Devin Haney and his team might need to do to remedy this situation is get to 140 pounds before Teofimo does. Once you get there, see about getting yourself in line for a title shot. They could stay at 135 pounds, wait for the winner of Fortuna versus Diaz to emerge, and then they could fight the winner of that fight. Might be interesting.
It might.
But what's that really going to do?
It's a good, interesting fight.
But there are good, interesting fights at 140 pounds. What I think is that might be time for Devin Haney to move up. He's not going to get Vasyl Lomachenko. He's not going to get Teofimo Lopez. He's not going to get Ryan Garcia. He's not going to get Gervonta Davis. So what are you sticking around 135 pounds for? Given what's going on, what Devin might need to do is beat Teofimo to the punch, get himself to 140 pounds, and in line for a title shot. Because it's looking a lot like Teofimo might end up fighting Vasyl Lomachenko for a second time.
That's the way all of that breaks down.
Another news per tweet from Michael Benson. Eddie Hearn responds to Bob Arum's comments on the AJ versus Fury collapse. It was my fault because I was greedy with Saudi? He's unquestionably the greediest man I have ever met. Bob Arum, he is talking absolute. He needs to go. What was it that Nas said? He just needs to finish. Eddie's not going to have much trouble convincing people Bob is greedy. I mean, he's not. Eddie's not going to have much trouble convincing people that Bob Arum is 2 times, 5 times, or 10 times greedier than Eddie Hearn is. He's not.
Nope.
You got to think about what Bob Arum is saying, essentially. You're essentially saying that because Eddie Hearn tried to get you guys as much money as possible, that's what fucked up the fight? Not the arbitrator's ruling. Not your existing fiasco with Deontay Wilder and all of that. No, that's not what fucked up the fight. What fucked up the fight was Eddie Hearn ensuring that this turns out to be the biggest and best and most lucrative fight for all the aforementioned parties. You're trying to convince us that's what fucked up the fight.
Right.
Eddie Hearn is the one with a reputation for overpaying his fighters. Eddie Hearn is the one with the reputation for ensuring that his guys and gals, the both of them, they ain't complaining, that they end up in the best position possible. That's Eddie Hearn's reputation, not Bob's.
Okay.
Bob Arum's sitting around calling somebody greedy. Look, I'll tell you something. There's a lot of people right now looking at the way all of this broke down. They're thinking that Bob Arum is senile. And that's what these comments are indicative of. That old Bob, a little bit too old, maybe he needs to pack it up. But I'll tell you, Bob's not senile. He's still as sharp as he ever was. And even though his version of the story is a very tough sell, rest assured, he knows exactly what he's doing. That whether we got here through divisiveness, that it was always their intention to stage a third fight with Wilder, or we got here due to unforeseen circumstance, a fumble, that maybe the top-ranked people, they thought the arbitrator would rule in their favor, and he didn't. Any way you slice it, Bob's still very sharp, make no mistake.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, he was sharp enough to smooth things over with Teofimo Lopez, wasn't he?
He was.
I think a lot of things, I'll tell you, but Bob Arum being senile, no, that ain't one of them. That guy knows exactly what he's doing. Now, not the least bit surprised that Bob Arum, that Frank Warren, that Tyson Fury are trying to turn this around on Eddie Hearn. Not the least bit surprised they're trying to make this his fault when this is what I told you they was going to do. They were going to try to wrap this around Eddie Hearn's neck and make the fights collapse his fault, when in reality, it's their fault. It's on them. If you go and buy the cover story, if you believe all of that stuff,
Take it at face value.
you guys is the ones that fucked up the fight, not Eddie Hearn. Eddie Hearn was on the brink of delivering that fight. In spite of all your negativity, in spite of all your pessimism, Eddie Hearn,
He got it done.
many ways delivered the fight, and it's your existing situation that fucked it up. That's if you're going by the cover story. If you're like me and you're not going by the cover story, it seems to me that, yeah, Eddie Hearn delivered the fight, but you never had any intention of having it yourself. What you were hoping is that he would fail. What you were hoping is that the environment was still unstable enough that he'd never be able to get the investors to invest in that fight here and now, so that you could then turn around and blame him for the fight's collapse. And that's not the way it happened. The way it happened, those Saudis were ready to put that money up. And it's your situation that fucked everything up. You're going to have a hell of a hard time convincing the boxing community at large that we got here because of something Eddie Hearn did or something that he didn't do, when he covered his own ass. And you guys didn't. You heard that right. He covered his own ass publicly by publicly fielding questions every step of the way. Oh, Frank Warren, Bob Arum, and Tyson Fury might try to lambast Eddie Hearn for those weekly updates we were getting, boxing community, but those weekly updates kept us in the know. And that transparency, well, that makes Eddie Hearn a lot more trustworthy than Bob Arum, a lot more trustworthy than Frank Warren, and a lot more trustworthy than Tyson Fury. Bob and Frank, Tyson would have had it their way. Eddie would have kept the entire boxing community out of the loop, and it would have been that much easier to wrap this entire situation around his neck
It's his fault.
if he didn't inform everyone of what was going on, if he didn't keep everyone in the loop. And hindsight, it looks like Eddie did everything he could to deliver that fight. It looks like you guys made it hard for him every step of the way. That's the look of it. Outside looking in, all the negativity, all the pessimism was coming from the Tyson Fury side of things, not the Eddie Hearn and Anthony Joshua side of things. So we can clearly see one side wanted this fight more than the other. One side was just a lot more consistent than the other.
3 weeks after the fights collapse, you want to change the narrative.
3 weeks after fights collapse, you're hoping that people have forgotten everything they've seen so far, that Eddie Hearn was very optimistic about the fight, very consistent, week after week, and he did his best to deliver the fight. But you guys, what were you guys doing? You guys were being negative.
The whole time.
And we didn't forget. And finally, for those of you that took in last night's action by way of ESPN, Stevenson versus Nakthila, I'm going to keep it short, I'm going to keep it simple. It wasn't an exciting fight.
No.
And
No.
ultimately, it's up to the two fighters in the ring, the both of them, to create memorable moments in the match. Though ahead of the match, you already knew
You did.
that if anybody here stands a good chance of having things their way, it's Shakur. He is the better boxer. So much so that I myself didn't bother to break down the fight, because it's not the kind of fight that requires a breakdown.
Shakur was the favorite.
I'm sure that many of you out there, like myself, felt that Shakur had everything it took to win this fight. And it wasn't about Shakur winning the fight so much as how he wins the fight. Can he do so in memorable fashion? Because this is not a memorable opponent. This is an unheralded guy from Namibia who's got a couple of knockouts, but he has yet to make a statement, a real statement, in the sport of boxing. You figure that Shakur's going to go in there. He's got everything it takes to win.
He did win.
Tim Bradley, in so many words, said that he was struggling to stay awake during the fight. Andre Ward, in so many words, said that, Shakur needs to be more exciting, something along those lines. And regardless of what you think of those individuals and what they had to say about it, they're not off base. This is boxing, this is a sport, but it's also the entertainment business. And you're either entertaining the paying public or you're not. Now, it's not my place to tell Shakur Stevenson what he should or shouldn't do. No, it's not my role in all of this. I can only tell you what I think. And if you want to know what I think, and you're here, so I'll assume that you do, Shakur boxed a very smart fight against a more statuesque guy than himself, a guy who actually has some length and has some power. Shakur was looking to work off the counter to hit Nakthila with punches that he doesn't see. And the problem with working off the counter is that if you're waiting for the other guy to throw and the other guy's being economic, you're essentially being economic as well because you're working off of what he's doing. And if he's not doing a lot, neither are you.
That's how that breaks down.
Then you end up in a situation where neither of yous is doing all that much and neither of yous are entertaining anybody. You want to be careful in those situations when you're a young fighter because what you don't want to do is end up in the who needs your committee, who needs your club. The committee, the club that Demetrius Andrade, other fighters like him, are a part of. The way you can box, we can see you can box, and you can win.
You can.
But people, they're not all that interested in seeing you win because they're not entertained. And you can break down the nuts and bolts of the fight mechanics and all of that. You can do that. You can secure the W. But what you can't do is force people to watch. What you can't do is force people to be interested.
Can't do that.
That's the one thing you can't do. This is a spectator sport. And, post-fight, Shakur Stevenson released a statement saying, I apologize to all my fans. I didn't feel good tonight, but I did what I had to do to win. Thank you for all the support, and I promise better for further fights to come.
I think he's handling things the right way.
Because he's at least acknowledging how the spectators in this spectator sport might have felt watching this fight, that perhaps he just wasn't performing at a level to where anybody had any reason to get excited. That's good. That's very good, because he can sit there and be bitter about it. He can sit there and cry about it. He can sit there and say things like, well, they're not the ones in the ring, and they're not the ones fighting. And he can say this and that, and none of that is going to make last night's fight exciting. None of that is going to make you any fans, because ultimately what you want is for people to watch you. What you want is for people to want to watch you. You're not going to do that with performances like that and then, making excuses afterwards.
Shakur can box.
He can box his fucking ass off, but what he might want to do now is develop into a strong finisher.